"Don't talk," the prisoner whispered through the bars. Officer Jordan Hayes froze, her hand resting on her holster. The fluorescent hum of the Dallas County Detention Center was a constant companion, but tonight, it felt like a silent judgment. At first, she thought it was a trick, another inmate playing games. She'd been on the job for 5 years, and she knew every sound, every shadow, every con. But then she saw his eyes. They were wide, sharp, and terrified, a stark contrast to the hardened faces she saw every day. And what he revealed inside that jail would not only save her life, it would shock everyone who heard it, exposing a conspiracy that reached from the darkest corners of the prison to the very top of law enforcement, all tied to a supernatural secret that should have never been unleashed. Stay with me until the end because this story will leave you stunned. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now let's begin. Officer Jordan Hayes had been walking these corridors for 5 years. She knew every sound, every shadow, every trick the inmates tried to pull. The night shift on Block D was supposed to be quiet. Most prisoners were asleep by 11 o'clock, and the hallways echoed with nothing but her footsteps and the distant thrum of the ventilation system. But tonight felt different. Tonight, something was wrong. It started with the silence. Too much silence. Usually, there would be snores, maybe some restless murmurs, the occasional cough. But cell Block D was dead quiet, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to break. Jordan's radio crackled softly on her shoulder as she made her rounds, checking each cell methodically. The air was thick, heavy, with a cold that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Everything appeared normal until she reached cell 47. Elijah Reed sat on his narrow bunk, his back straight, eyes wide open, staring directly at her. He was a lifer, sentenced for a triple homicide he claimed he didn't commit. He was a mystery, respected and feared by the other inmates, a quiet man who kept to himself. In all her years working this block, he had never caused trouble. He kept to himself, read books, and stayed out of fights. But tonight, his face was pale, a fine layer of sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. The usual stoicism was gone, replaced by a desperate urgency. "Officer Hayes," he whispered, his voice a low rasp that barely carried through the bars. "Don't talk. Just listen." Jordan's training kicked in. Never show weakness. Never let an inmate think they have control. She stepped closer to the bars, her hand instinctively moving toward her radio, but something in Elijah's voice stopped her. It wasn't threatening or manipulative. It was pure, unadulterated terror. "They're going to kill you," he continued, his voice barely audible. "They're not waiting for a prison break. They're waiting for a sacrifice." Jordan's heart started beating faster. She glanced down the corridor, but it looked empty, just like always. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows between the cells, creating dark pockets where someone could hide. The cold air in the block felt colder now, clinging to her skin. She looked back at Elijah, trying to read his face, trying to decide if this was a bizarre, elaborate game or something far more sinister. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered back, surprising herself by lowering her voice to match his. "Because you're one of the few with a clean soul," Elijah said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I can see it, officer. I can see the light around you. They want to snuff that out. They need it." The words were so strange, so out of place, they sent a shiver down her spine. The radio on Jordan's shoulder crackled again. Dispatch checking in for her hourly report. She had 30 seconds to respond, or they would send backup. But if Elijah was telling the truth, calling for help might be the exact signal the attackers were waiting for. She needed to know more. "Who is waiting for me?" she asked. "Sergeant Miller," he whispered, the name alone causing Jordan's blood to run cold. "And 2 other guards. They're waiting for you at the end of the hall, near the utility closet. They're not waiting with shivs and socks. They're waiting for something far worse." Sergeant Miller. A veteran of the force, a man with a reputation for being tough but fair. He had been her training officer. The idea of him being involved in a plot to kill her was absurd. But the way Elijah said his name, with a fear that was deeper than any Jordan had ever heard in this prison, made her second-guess everything. "What do you mean, something worse?" she asked, a knot of fear tightening in her stomach. Elijah hesitated, his hands gripping the edge of his bunk. They've been building a ritual, he said, the words coming out in a rush. They've been collecting fear. The fear of every inmate, every guard, every visitor. It's what powers the thing he keeps in the utility closet. The implications hit Jordan like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't just an attack. This was something she couldn't even begin to comprehend. A supernatural twist to a routine night shift. Her radio crackled again. This time, the voice was more insistent. Unit 7, please respond. Status report required. Jordan looked down the corridor again. In the distance, she could see the security checkpoint where she needed to log her patrol. It was about 50 yards away, past several cells, around a corner, and through a heavy metal door. Normally, it was a walk she had made thousands of times without thinking. Tonight, it felt like walking into a trap set by forces beyond her understanding. How do you know all this? She asked Elijah, her voice barely a breath. I can see them, he said, his voice filled with an ancient weariness. I can see what they are. Miller, he's been tainted for a long time. He sold a piece of his soul to a shadow. In return, he got power, influence, and the promise of a dark kingdom. He promised to feed the shadow more souls. He's been working his way up, planting seeds of fear and violence, waiting for the right moment. The right soul. Jordan's instincts, the same instincts that had kept her alive in some of the city's worst neighborhoods, told her that Elijah was telling the truth. The way some of the guards looked at her lately, the way conversations stopped when she walked by. She had dismissed it as typical prison behavior, but now it all made sense. She was the final piece of their dark puzzle. There's more, Elijah continued, his voice a low, urgent hum. He's planning a mass release once the ritual is complete. The entity will possess key inmates, turning them into mindless puppets. A riot will break out, chaos will descend. He'll use the confusion to escape with the creature, and by the time anyone figures out what happened, it will be too late. They will have all the souls they need to become unstoppable. The radio crackled a third time. Unit 7. Immediate response required. Are you code 4? Jordan had to make a decision. She could call for backup, but who could she trust? If Miller had a network of corrupt guards, as Elijah claimed, calling for help might lead her straight into their hands. Or she could try to handle this herself, using Elijah's impossible information to turn the tables on the ambush. Either way, she was putting her life on the line. She looked at Elijah one more time, studying his face in the dim light. 5 years of working with criminals had taught her to read people, to spot lies and manipulation. But all she saw in Elijah's eyes was genuine concern and fear. Not fear for himself, but fear for what was about to happen to her. If you're lying to me, she whispered. If this is some kind of setup. I'm not lying, Elijah interrupted, his voice firm. Officer Hayes, in all the years you've worked this block, have I ever lied to you? Have I ever caused you trouble? She thought about it. Elijah had always been respectful, quiet, almost invisible. He never asked for special treatment, never complained about the food or his cell conditions, never got into fights with other inmates. If anything, he was the kind of prisoner that made her job easier. But now, sitting in his cell in the middle of the night, he was risking everything to warn her about a plot that could get him killed if the other inmates, or more accurately, the other guards, found out he had talked. The radio crackled again, and Jordan knew she was out of time. Whatever was going to happen, it was going to happen now. She took a deep breath, made her choice, and prepared for what came next. She needed to know more, and she needed to act now. Jordan pressed her back against the cold concrete wall, her mind racing through possibilities. She had 30 seconds before dispatch would send a patrol to check on her. 30 seconds to decide whether to trust a convicted felon who spoke of shadows and souls or follow protocol that might get her killed. Elijah, she whispered, leaning closer to the bars. If what you're saying is true, I need details. Where exactly are they positioned? What is the creature? Elijah shifted on his bunk, his voice dropping even lower. Miller is in the utility closet, just past the door to the main corridor. He's surrounded by 2 others, one a guard I see often, the other, Thnu. They're creating a circle. And the creature, it's a thing of shadows. It feeds on negative energy. It's what's making the block so cold and quiet. It's building itself up. Jordan's blood ran cold. She knew the utility closet. It was off-limits to all personnel except maintenance and select officers. It was a blind spot, a place where cameras didn't reach. If Jackson was there with a master key, he could unlock any cell on the block within seconds. How did Miller get access to this entity? She asked, though she dreaded the answer. He didn't find it, Elijah said, his eyes darting toward the other cells. He summoned it. In return for power and protection, he agreed to feed it. He's a fanatic. He believes he's a prophet of a new order. He's been preparing for a long time. He's been collecting objects for the ritual. The pieces started falling into place in Jordan's mind. Miller's recent erratic behavior, his secretive meetings with certain guards, the way he would suddenly appear in places where he wasn't supposed to be. She had assumed it was stress, but this was worse than she imagined. This wasn't just corruption, it was something evil, a rot from the inside. Her radio crackled again, more urgently this time. Unit 7, this is dispatch. Respond immediately or we're sending backup to your location. Jordan made her decision. She pressed the radio button and forced her voice to sound calm. Unit 7 to dispatch. All clear on Block D. Just had to deal with a minor medical issue with an inmate. Continuing patrol. Copy that. Copy that, Unit 7. Report back in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. That gave her time to think, to plan, to figure out how to survive what was coming. But first, she needed to know everything Elijah knew. Why now? She asked. Why tonight? Elijah looked toward the ceiling, as if checking for listening ears. Tonight is the night of the black moon. It's when the veil between worlds is thinnest. The shadow is most powerful, and Miller can complete the ritual. He's been waiting months for this. He can't fail. Jordan felt a surge of nausea. This wasn't just about hurting her. This was about a coordinated supernatural event that could put dozens of dangerous criminals back on the streets, possessed by an ancient evil. And somehow, she stumbled into the middle of it. There's something else, Elijah continued, his voice barely a breath. The reason they picked you specifically. It's not random. Your family. The bloodline of the Hayes family is strong. It's pure. It's what the shadow craves. It's what gives it strength. The ritual can only be completed with a pure soul. The room seemed to spin around Jordan. Her family had always been a source of strength, a tight-knit unit of preachers, teachers, and police officers. The idea that someone would target her because of her family's legacy, their spiritual purity, had never occurred to her, but it made terrible sense. They know everything about you, Elijah whispered. Your schedule, your route to work, your apartment building. Officer Hayes, this goes deeper than just tonight. Even if you survive this, they'll try again. The shadow won't rest until it consumes a Hayes soul. Jordan's hands were shaking now. She gripped the radio tighter, trying to steady herself. 5 years of training, 5 years of handling dangerous situations, and she had never felt this vulnerable. But she couldn't fall apart. Not now. Elijah, I need you to do something for me, she said, her voice filled with a new resolve. What? If things go bad tonight, if they manage to hurt me, I need you to tell the investigators everything you've told me. Can you do that? Elijah nodded grimly. I'll tell them, but it's not going to come to that. You're smarter than they think you are. Jordan looked down the hallway again. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move and shift. Somewhere in those shadows, 3 men were waiting to end her life. And somewhere in the facility's security office, corrupt guards were probably watching, ready to disable cameras or unlock doors at the right moment. But she had one advantage they didn't expect. She knew they were there. She knew what they were. Elijah, is there another way out of this block? Something they might not have thought of? He thought for a moment. Then his eyes lit up. The maintenance tunnel. There's an access panel behind the vending machines near cell 22. It leads to the main corridor on Block C, but it's tight and you'd have to crawl. It's the one place they can't see on their spiritual map. Jordan knew the vending machines. They were about 20 yards behind her in the opposite direction from where the ambush was waiting. If she could make it there without being seen, she might have a chance. But there's a problem, Elijah added. To get to the access panel, you'd have to pass 3 other cells where Miller's most loyal followers are housed. If any of them see you and alert the others, the plan was risky, but it was better than walking straight into a trap. Jordan checked her watch. 18 minutes until her next check-in. She had to move now. Elijah, if I don't make it, do you? You will, he interrupted. You're tougher than any of them realize. I've watched you handle situations that would break other guards. You can do this. Jordan took a deep breath, said a silent prayer, and began moving toward the vending machines. Each step felt like it echoed through the entire facility. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure the inmates could hear it. Behind her, she could sense Elijah watching from his cell, probably praying just as hard as she was. As she approached cell 22, she could see the vending machines in the dim light. Just 10 more steps, 5 more steps. She was almost there when she heard it. The sound of metal scraping against concrete. Someone was moving. Jordan froze against the wall, her breath catching in her throat. The scraping sound came again, closer this time. Metal dragging across concrete in slow, deliberate movements. Someone was definitely awake, and they were moving with purpose. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows, trying to become invisible. The vending machines were only 5 feet away, but those 5 feet might as well have been 5 miles. Between her and safety, she could see the outline of cell 19, where Desmond Wallace was housed. One of Miller's enforcers, a man serving time for aggravated assault, had already attacked 2 guards since arriving at the facility. The scraping stopped. Jordan held her breath, counting the seconds. 2, 3. Then she heard it. The soft shuffle of bare feet on concrete. Someone was moving in cell 19. A shadow passed across the narrow window of the cell door. Desmond was awake, pacing. Jordan could hear him whispering to himself, or maybe talking to someone else. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was agitated, excited, like someone preparing for a hunt. Jordan's radio crackled softly on her shoulder, and she quickly reached up to turn the volume down, but it was too late. The whispering in cell 19 stopped abruptly. The shadow in the window went still. For 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes, nothing moved. Jordan's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she was sure it could be heard throughout the entire block. Sweat dripped down her back despite the cool air conditioning. Her hand instinctively moved toward her service weapon, though she knew drawing it would only escalate the situation. Then Desmond's voice drifted through the bars of his cell, casual and conversational, as if he were talking to a friend. "Evening, Officer Hayes, working late tonight?" Jordan's blood turned to ice. He knew she was there. The plan was compromised before it had even started, but something in his tone told her he didn't know about Elijah's warning. He thought she was making her normal rounds, walking into their trap exactly as planned. She had 2 choices. She could retreat back toward Elijah's cell and radio for backup, abandoning any hope of reaching the maintenance tunnel, or she could play along, pretend everything was normal, and try to buy herself more time. "Just making my rounds, Wallace," she replied, forcing her voice to sound steady and professional. "Everything quiet tonight?" Desmond chuckled, a sound that sent chills down Jordan's spine. "Oh, it's been real quiet, but I got a feeling things are about to get interesting." Jordan took a careful step toward the vent. "ING machines. Well, try to get some sleep. Morning comes early." "You know, Officer Hayes," Desmond continued, and she could hear him moving closer to his cell door. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately. About how you walk these halls every night, all alone. Thinking you're safe." Another step toward the vending machines. Jordan could see the access panel now, partially hidden behind the soda machine. Just 3 more steps and she could start working on the screws that held it in place. "That's nice, Wallace. Sweet dreams." But Desmond wasn't done talking. "See, the thing is, some of us have been wondering what would happen if something went wrong on one of your little walks. What would happen if you needed help and nobody could hear you scream?" Jordan's hand found her radio, but she didn't press the button yet. If she called for backup now, Desmond would know something was wrong. He'd alert Miller and the others, and they'd either disappear back to their cells or accelerate their timeline. Either way, she'd lose her only advantage. Wallace, I think you should get back to bed before you say something you'll regret. Regret? Desmond laughed louder this time. Lady, the only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. That's when Jordan heard it. The sound she had been dreading. The soft click of a cell door unlocking. Desmond had a key. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Miller wasn't the only one with access to the cells. They had multiple keys, multiple escape routes, multiple ways to turn this facility into a war zone. Elijah had saved her from walking into the original ambush, but he didn't know about all of them. Jordan abandoned stealth and ran toward the vending machines. Behind her, she could hear Desmond's cell door creaking open, his bare feet slapping against the concrete floor as he stepped into the hallway. She reached the soda machine and dove behind it just as footsteps echoed from the other end of the block. Miller and the others were moving too. She's by the machines, Desmond called out, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Just like Miller said she would be. Jordan's hands shook as she found the access panel. 4 screws held it in place, and she pulled out her multi-tool, working frantically to remove them. The first screw came loose easily, but the second was rusted in place. She could hear footsteps getting closer. Multiple sets now, moving with coordinated precision. Officer Hayes, Miller's voice drifted down the hallway, sickeningly sweet. We just want to talk to you. Come out where we can see you. The second screw finally gave way, and Jordan started on the third. Her hands were slippery with sweat, making it hard to grip the tool. Behind her, she could hear them getting closer, their footsteps mixing with whispered communications. They were hunting her like a pack of wolves. You know, your family's purity caused us a lot of problems, Miller added, his voice coming from a different direction. They were spreading out, trying to surround her position. The rituals require a strong life force. Your brother, Detective Marcus Hayes, his soul is a shield. We had to find another way. We had to get to you. The third screw clattered to the floor, and Jordan started on the fourth. This one was tighter than the others, and she had to put her full weight behind the multi-tool to get it to budge. The metal groaned in protest, a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet hallway. We tried to handle this the easy way. Miller's voice joined the others, coming from directly behind her. We tried to turn your brother. Tried to corrupt him. But he's a rock. Just like you. And his family's, well, your family. They're a problem. Jordan's blood froze. They had tried to corrupt her brother, Marcus, who had 3 kids and a wife who coached Little League on weekends and volunteered at the food bank every Christmas. They had put her family in danger, and she hadn't even known. The fourth screw finally came free, and the access panel swung open. Behind it was a narrow tunnel, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. Jordan could see light at the other end, probably 50 feet away. It would be tight, claustrophobic, and if they caught her halfway through, she'd be trapped like a rat in a pipe. But it was her only chance. She started to climb into the tunnel when a hand grabbed her ankle. Going somewhere, Officer Hayes? Desmond's voice was right behind her, his grip like iron around her leg. Jordan kicked backward with her free foot, connecting with something soft. Desmond grunted, and his grip loosened enough for her to pull her leg free. She scrambled into the tunnel, her radio and equipment belt scraping against the narrow walls. Behind her, she could hear them arguing. Should we follow her? Desmond asked. No, Miller replied. We know where that tunnel leads. The end of the tunnel is sealed. She has to come back out. She's trapped. Desmond, you and the other guard, lock down the tunnel from both ends. I'm going to pay Elijah Reed a visit. Jordan's heart stopped. Elijah. They knew he had warned her, and now they were going to kill him for it. She was crawling through the tunnel as fast as she could, her knees scraping against the rough concrete, but she could already hear them moving away, heading back towards cell 47. She had to make a choice. Keep crawling towards safety and let Elijah die, or go back and try to save the man who had risked everything to save her. The tunnel stretched ahead of her, dark and narrow, leading to safety and backup and the chance to call for help. But behind her, a good man was about to pay with his life for doing the right thing. Jordan closed her eyes, said a prayer, and made her decision. She started crawling backward toward the access panel, toward certain danger, toward a fight she probably couldn't win. But she couldn't live with herself if she let Elijah die for her sake. As she emerged from the tunnel, she could hear Miller and Desmond's voices getting closer to Elijah's cell. She had maybe 2 minutes before they reached him. 2 minutes to figure out how to save a man's life when she could barely save her own. Jordan reached for her radio, but hesitated. Calling for backup would take too long. By the time other guards reached Block D, Elijah would be dead, and his killers would be back in their cells, pretending to sleep. She needed a different plan. That's when she remembered something a retired police chief, Marcus Thorne, had told her during a community event months ago. He had been a mentor to her brother, a man who spoke of ancient spirits and a different kind of justice. He was a spiritualist, a practitioner of a traditional African-American spiritual path, who had a reputation for solving cases that seemed impossible. She had dismissed it as superstition then, but now, it felt like her only hope. He had told her about a spiritual protection, a symbol of the Hayes family, a small, intricate carving she always wore on her necklace. It was a charm he had given her to protect her from negative energy. Maybe he wasn't just talking about bad vibes. Jordan crept back toward the cell block, staying in the shadows, her heart pounding with every step. She could see Miller and Desmond now, moving down the hallway with purpose. Miller had something in his hand that glinted in the fluorescent light. Not a key this time, something sharp and dark. She was running out of time. In 30 seconds, they would reach Elijah's cell. In 30 seconds, a good man would die unless she did something. Jordan took a deep breath, stepped out of the shadows, and prepared to fight for both their lives. Jordan pressed her back against the concrete wall, her service weapon drawn, but held low. The fluorescent lights above flickered intermittently, casting dancing shadows that made everything feel like a nightmare. She could hear Miller and Desmond's footsteps getting closer to Elijah's cell. Their voices are low but urgent. "Joe, you sure he's the one who talked?" Desmond whispered. "Has to be," Miller replied, his voice cold as winter steel. Nobody else on this block would risk their neck for a guard. Reed always was different. Thought he was better than the rest of us. Jordan's mind raced through her options. She could fire a warning shot, but the sound would bring every guard in the facility running. And in the chaos, Elijah might still end up dead. She could try to take them both down, but Miller had a reputation for brutality and Desmond was built like a linebacker. In a straight fight, she'd probably lose. That's when she remembered the fire alarm. Every cell block had emergency protocols. When the fire alarm sounded, all cell doors automatically locked down and emergency lighting activated. It would buy her time and trap Miller and Desmond in the hallway where backup could find them. She holstered her weapon and sprinted toward the alarm pull station near the security checkpoint. Her boots echoed off the walls, and she heard Miller curse behind her. "She's making a run for it." Desmond called out. "Forget Reed. Get her." Jordan reached the alarm and yanked the handle down hard. Immediately, the hallway filled with the deafening wail of sirens and flashing red lights. Emergency protocols kicked in automatically. Cell doors slammed shut with metallic clangs that echoed like thunder. The main corridor doors sealed with heavy clicks. Jackson and Tommy were trapped in the hallway with her, but so was she. "Smart move, Officer Hayes," Miller called out over the alarm. His voice had changed, becoming more respectful. "But now we're all locked in here together until the fire department arrives. That gives us plenty of time to finish our conversation." Jordan drew her weapon again, keeping her back to the wall. The flashing red emergency lights made everything look like a horror movie, casting wild shadows that moved and jumped with each pulse. She could see Miller and Desmond approaching slowly, methodically, like predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. "This doesn't have to end badly," she called out, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "Backup is already on the way. Surrender now and maybe we can work something out." Miller laughed, a sound that sent chills down her spine. "Work something out, lady? We're already looking at life sentences in a place worse than this. What's a few more charges?" Desmond spread out to her left, trying to flank her position. Jordan swiveled to keep both men in sight, but the flashing lights made it hard to track their movements. Every shadow could hide an attacker. You know what I think? Miller continued, still moving closer. I think you're bluffing about backup. I think you pulled that alarm hoping to scare us off. But here's the thing about emergency lockdowns. Nobody can get in here until the all-clear is given. And the only person who can make that all-clear is you. Jordan's heart sank. He was right. The emergency protocols were designed to contain fires and prevent smoke from spreading through the facility. That meant the hallway was sealed until she manually reset the system. She had trapped herself with 2 killers. So, here's what's going to happen, Miller said, pulling something from his pocket. In the red flashing light, Jordan could see it was a crude knife fashioned from a piece of metal and wrapped with electrical tape. You're going to reset that alarm. Then you're going to unlock our cells so we can get back to bed. And then you're going to forget this whole night ever happened. And if I don't? Desmond answered from her left, his voice thick with menace. Then we make sure you can't tell anybody what you saw tonight. Permanently. Jordan's training kicked in. She had been in dangerous situations before, but never trapped alone with armed inmates. The manual said to de-escalate, to look for compromise, to avoid violence whenever possible. But looking at Miller's eyes in the flashing red light, she knew there would be no compromise tonight. And you're making a mistake, she said, raising her weapon. I've already called this in. Other guards know exactly where I am. No, you haven't, Miller replied confidently. Because if you had, you wouldn't have pulled that fire alarm. You would have waited for backup. The fact that you're trapped in here with us tells me you're flying solo, Officer Hayes. Just like your brother when he was investigating our operation. The mention of her brother made Jordan's anger flare. These men had threatened her family, corrupted guards, and turned her workplace into a battlefield. They had forced Elijah to risk his life just to warn her about their plans. Enough was enough. You want to know the truth? Jordan said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Elijah Reed isn't the only one who talked. Half the inmates on this block are tired of your games. They're tired of living in fear while you and your friends turn this place into your personal kingdom. Miller's confident expression flickered for just a moment. You're lying. Am I? She challenged. Ask yourself why nobody else came to help you tonight. Ask yourself why the other cells stayed quiet when that alarm went off. Maybe your reign of terror isn't as popular as you think. Desmond glanced nervously at Miller. She's just trying to mess with our heads. But Jordan could see doubt creeping into Miller's eyes. In a place like this, paranoia was a survival tool. The suggestion that other inmates might be working against them was exactly the kind of psychological warfare that could break apart their alliance. Just as the doubt was about to turn to panic, Miller's face hardened. You're a clever little thing. But your words mean nothing to the shadow. It's here, officer. It's here with us now. The air in the hallway grew even colder. The flashing red lights seemed to grow dimmer, as if a presence was sapping the energy from the bulbs. A new shadow, darker and deeper than any natural one, began to coalesce in the space behind Miller. It writhed and twisted, a formless mass of pure malice. It was what Elijah had warned her about. The entity. It's time for you to become part of the ritual, Miller hissed, his eyes now glowing with a faint, malevolent red light. He raised his knife. Jordan had to do something. She had to fight. But as the shadow surged toward her, a voice echoed in her mind. Not her own thoughts, not Miller's, but a calming, powerful presence. Trust the blood. Trust the light. It was Elijah. He was projecting his voice, his consciousness, into her mind. Jordan. A different, familiar voice boomed from the security checkpoint door. Don't let it touch you. Use the charm. It was Marcus Thorne, the retired police chief. He had a silver cross in one hand and a bottle filled with what looked like holy water in the other. His eyes were focused not on the men, but on the shadowy entity. He must have been tracking Miller for a long time, and he knew what was happening. He had been a guardian of his community for a long time, a warrior in a spiritual war she never even knew existed. Miller snarled, a sound more animal than human. Thorne, I knew you'd come. You're too late. The ritual is almost complete. Desmond rushed at Thorne, but the old man was ready. He threw the contents of the bottle, and the liquid sizzled on Desmond's skin like acid, causing him to shriek in pain and fall back. It wasn't holy water, Jordan realized. It was something else. A concoction of traditional herbs, a spiritual weapon against a spiritual enemy. Jordan looked at her necklace, at the small, intricate carving. She had worn it for years, a simple gift from a family friend. She had always thought it was a symbol of her family's legacy. Now she realized it was a weapon, a beacon of light. The soul of Hayes is what gives it power. Miller shrieked, no longer even pretending to be a man. I'll just have to take it from your cold, dead body. He lunged at her, his knife raised high. Jordan didn't hesitate. She threw herself to the side, and the knife plunged into the concrete wall where her head had been moments before. She scrambled to her feet, holding the charm, the light from it growing brighter as Miller approached. "You're not going to win," she yelled, her voice filled with a new courage. "The Hayes family protects its own. You picked the wrong one to mess with." Miller's eyes went wide. He lunged at her again, but this time, Jordan was ready. She held the charm out, and a bright light shot out, hitting Miller square in the chest. He screamed in agony as the light burned him, his face twisting into a mask of pain and rage. He stumbled back, and the shadow behind him seemed to shrink, to whimper. Jordan didn't stop. She ran at him, not with her weapon, but with the full force of her faith. She held the charm high, and with a guttural cry, she slammed it into Miller's chest. The light exploded, and Miller's body contorted, convulsing as a black, oily smoke poured from his mouth and eyes. The shadow behind him screamed a sound that tore at the very fabric of the prison, and then it was gone, leaving only the smell of burnt hair and a cold that seemed to linger. Miller collapsed to the ground, unconscious, the knife falling from his hand. Desmond lay groaning on the ground, his face and body covered in burns. The wailing of the fire alarm continued, but the oppressive cold was gone, replaced by a sense of calm. The fight was over. For now. 3 hours later, when the smoke cleared and backup finally arrived, Miller and Desmond were found unconscious in the hallway. Jordan had used their own paranoia against them, turning allies into enemies until they turned on each other. But she had also used something else. Something she hadn't believed in until tonight. Elijah Reed was relocated to protective custody and later testified in the corruption trial that sent 5 guards to prison. The drug ring connected to Miller's shadowy dealings was completely dismantled thanks to the evidence Jordan and Marcus Thorne helped uncover that night. Sometimes the most unlikely heroes emerge from the darkest places. Elijah Reed proved that redemption is possible even behind bars, and that a pure soul can be found in the most unexpected places. And Officer Jordan Hayes learned that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right when everything is falling apart, even when the fight is against something you can't see. Their story reminds us that in our darkest moments, hope can come from the most unexpected places. What did you think of this incredible story? Drop a comment below and let me know. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more amazing true stories. I'll see you in the next one.